All right. Good morning to our speakers and distinguished guests from the government, the business sector, the diplomatic community, the academe, and the think tanks. I am Joyce Ilas. I am the Advocacy and Communications Lead of Chat-based ADR Institute, and I will be your host and moderator for today. On behalf of the Chat-based ADR Institute, I welcome you all to the second virtual business roundtable discussion for this year, entitled Reinvigorating the Philippine Manufacturing Sector for Job Creation. Now, this event aims to gather key government officials, the business community, and academic stakeholders to share their insights on strengthening the country's manufacturing sector while advancing the workforce pipeline and developing human capital to build a future-ready Filipino workforce. So to formally open our event today, let us all welcome Chat-based ADR Institute's President, Professor Victor Andres Dindo Manhit. Professor Manhit is also the Managing Director of the Bauer Group Asia in the Philippines. He served as Associate Professor and Chair for the Political Science Department of the De La Salle University. He was a former Undersecretary of the Department of Education, and he was also appointed as one of the ASEAN Regional Forum experts and eminent persons by the Department of Foreign Affairs. He regularly contributes articles and columns on renowned news platforms like the Philippine Daily Inquirer and Business World. His expertise include strategic studies and management, legislative research, and public policy analysis. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Dindo Manhit.
Thank you, Joyce. I hope I can be heard. Is my video good?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning to everyone. Good morning to all our participants. Good morning to our resource persons, speakers. We hope to have, based on yesterday's registration, at least 180 participants registered. I hope they can all join us this morning. But allow me to start this virtual business roundtable by focusing on what we try to track in Strat-based ADR Institute. And I have prepared some slides as we try to look at issues from political, governance, socio-economic issues. We see geopolitical risk. But as we look at geopolitical risk from the point of view of Strat-based ADR Institute and our research and intelligence team, we actually see also from a geoeconomic point of view, geoeconomic opportunities, especially as we hear of deglobalization, geoeconomic confrontation, and even questions of the future of trade. This could be seen as challenges, but could be seen also as opportunities, especially when we have a new mindset of not only being driven by consumption-based economic growth, but one that can be driven by investment-driven growth through manufacturing sector. When I saw the latest GDP numbers last week, something that I noticed was that though we see a good number at 6% within the growth target of our own development budget coordination committee, but one thing that I took note of is the decline from the end of 2022 to the first quarter of the industrial sector. I've always believed that we cannot drive our economy simply based on consumption alone. We in Strat-based believe that with consumption also should have increased production. And key to that is industrial growth, not only by domestic investors, but now as we open up the economy more, by both domestic and foreign investors in the country, as it will deal with the continuing challenges of unemployment and underemployment in our country. We have recovered from pre-pandemic or pandemic challenges where we have seen our people suffering from high unemployment, and higher underemployment. But as we see business outlook in a more positive direction, with this hopefulness that beyond Q1, we will see higher consumer demand for products and services. We will see the full reopening of the economy and even increased business activities and sustained economic recovery. But we look at consumption or consumers itself. And we look at consumers, they are also hopeful, but their hopefulness is based on the availability of jobs, permanent employment, higher economy, and positive development in the country's COVID-19 situation. As I see these numbers, I'm reminded of a survey, a study that we have done the past 4 years, I think 2021. At 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022. Why 2019? This was when the former head of our government, President Duterte, started attacking the private sector, calling them oligarchs. But we saw good numbers then, and we see higher numbers now. That the private sector plays a crucial role in accelerating economic growth, according to this survey done for our institute by Pulsation. But the government and the private sector should engage in partnership in order to sustain our country's economic recovery. And key to this role is that the private sector, maybe in the service economy, but more so if we improve the manufacturing sector, can really create jobs, help uplift the lives of Filipinos out of poverty, and expand livelihood opportunities. So this study that we did Q3 of last year, on the first 100 days of the Marcos Jr. administration, we have a follow-up that focuses exactly on manufacturing. And we have a presentation prepared by Pulse Asia President, Dr. Ronnie Holmes, that will be shared later. But this morning, what we would like to push as an institute, as a think tank, as thought leaders, is that we need to shift to an investment-led growth. We believe we can sustain our economic gains by being more focused on investment-led that will create jobs, that will provide better income and livelihood for our people. And part of that shift to investment-led growth is we need to reinvigorate the manufacturing sector. With firms now having their capacity going back to pre-pandemic levels, we believe that there's a need for investment in the manufacturing sector to meet the growing demands of consumers. The old thinking was that let's produce, let's build on the manufacturing sector to export. But for us, we look at the over 110, 115 million Filipinos as consumers that drives economic growth. We see how increased productivity, create high-quality jobs, provide income and food security for these workers, for their families, as they turn themselves from workers to consumers. And last January, in our first monthly occasional paper, our research team argued for investments in manufacturing. And we said we need investments in manufacturing and managing through a position of strength. That the government should take full advantage of the existing sweet spot enjoyed by the country in the area of demographics, a median age of 25, natural resources, geographical location, language facility. So from a geopolitical, geoeconomic, there is that opportunity. And our continuing conversation from a geopolitical side with countries, with the diplomatic community, how they look south of where China is to look for options for supply chain manufacturing, options for greater consumers, which the Philippines can provide. We believe that this is the direction. And we hope that this morning's discussion allow us collectively to push this agenda of enhancing production for sustained economic growth. And with production comes consumption for high growth trajectory in the next decade or so. Again, good morning and thank you for joining us all, the 83 participants currently in our webinar at this moment. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much also for that very insightful opening remarks, Professor Dindo Manhit. Truly, collaboration or partnership between the private and public sector are important to accelerate and sustain our current economic growth, especially in the manufacturing sector, as you mentioned, sir. And consequently, of course, to create jobs that many Filipinos need. So for
Yes.
our first speaker for today, we have Mr. Sergio Ortiz Luis Jr. He is the president of the Employers Confederation of the Philippines and also the president of the Philippine Exporters Confederation Incorporated. He is also a director of the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry. For today, Mr. Ortiz Luis Jr. will talk about promoting investments for job creation as the key to sustained economic recovery. Unfortunately, though, he will not be able to join us live, but he did send us a video recording. So ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Mr. Sergio Ortiz Luis Jr.
Professor Victor Andres Dindo Manhit of the stat-based ADRi Institute, Trade Undersecretary Rafaelita Aldaba, Phoenix President Mr. Wilson Tan, Pulse Asia Research Incorporated President Dr. Ronald Holmes, CRC Director and UANP Professor Dr. Bernardo Villegas, columnist Mr. Andrew Marasigan, my colleagues in the industry and business community, other guests, participants, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. In 2 months, we'll be hearing from President Marcos about the administration's report card, which should include the result of the joint government and private sector high-profile campaign for more investments. We commend the DTI, particularly the team of Undersecretary Aldaba, which has been very consistent advocacy on industrialization and technology and skills upgrade to programs that also benefit the micro, small, and medium enterprises or MSMEs. In fact, 3 PhilExport members in this category that are aspiring to be ready for the 4th Industrial Revolution have been to technical assessments under the BOI's lead. The result should be higher productivity, especially as exporters, leading to bigger capacities and employment opportunities. The Philippine Export Development Plan, or the PEDP 2028, we again underscore the importance of diversifying our export basket by attracting investments in 4 clusters: industrial, manufacturing, technology, media and telecommunications, and health and the life science as identified by the DTI. These are all an employment plan of 2023 to 2028. Employers and labor sectors. We likewise noted that the green investment in the Philippines are among the highest in Asia. They're in waste management, such as recycling facilities, alternative agriculture like sustainable farming, and renewable energy. Other sectors with huge domestic and global prospects are coconut-based products and logistics because of surging e-commerce business. It is then relevant to mention the urgency of these investments to continuously and massively flow in to sustain the current performance. You might have read that the Board of Investment, or BOI, the country's lead investment promotion agency, have seen a 155% rise in approved investment for the first quarter up to 463.3 billion pesos, with 68 approved projects, mainly the renewable energy sector. Of these, local investment approvals grew 68%, amounting to 297.9 billion pesos compared to the 177.3 billion pesos last year. There was a huge surge of 3,722% in foreign investment, reaching 165.4 billion pesos compared to the 4.33 billion pesos last year. Leading the foreign investors in the first quarter were Germany, the Netherlands, the United States, Japan, and the United Kingdom. Meanwhile, investment in Western Visayas had the biggest share, followed by Calabarzon, Ilocos Region, Davao Region, Eastern Visayas Region. Complementing this performance is the country's employment figures, which increased to 48.8 million in February this year, 3.32 million higher than the 48.48 million employed persons reported in February 2022. Consequently, the country's unemployment rate decreased from 6.4% in February 2022 to 4.8% this year. This data suggests that the Philippine labor market is steadily recovering. But despite the higher performance of the labor market, challenges to improving the quality of employment across sectors still remain. Meanwhile, ensuring the upskilling and retooling of workers on the supply side has long been part of our development agenda. But we need to show proof of how we are doing in this area. This becomes such imperative as AI and robots threaten to take over most million jobs, a massive problem that we should be able to prepare for. The approval and amendment of laws such as public service, retail trade liberalization, foreign investment acts, and just last week, the clarification made on the VAT zero rating application of the Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentive for Enterprises, or CREATE law, are impetus to this campaign for more investors and high-quality jobs. As part of our contribution, ECOP and PhilExport are actively participating as members of a Trade Department-led core group that will help ensure that business continuity plans, or BCPs, are developed and institutionalized, especially among MSMEs. This is critical because of the impact of climate change and our vulnerability to natural disasters. ECOP is likewise continuously working with the Department of Labor and Employment and the Technical Education and Skills Development Authority in upgrading these skills, particularly to meet the demands of digital transformation that is evolving globally. However, as this groundwork for sustainable investment and employment are being implemented and laid down, we get to hear about bills such as the legislated wage increase. We agree that there are large firms capable of paying the wage increase, but they make up less than 2% of the Philippine companies, as more than 98% are MSMEs, which are the biggest providers of jobs in the formal sector. These MSMEs were so badly affected by the pandemic that half were forced to close to this day. Of these, only 10% of the 50 million in the labor market are formal minimum wage earners, while the remaining 90% have no employer. These 90% are composed of informal workers such as fisher folks, farmers, public transport drivers, and the underemployed, all of whom are not going to benefit from the legislated wage hike. No matter how well-intentioned, the potential repercussion of such a legislated proposal can bring us more problems, since the wage hike is not productivity-based. Companies pay out by on shedding work. Community will prepare tackled by the Tripartite Wage Board, where issues are carefully reviewed and all affected sectors and relevant government agencies. We are concerned that in legislative wage hearings, the resource person may not have complete representation. Let me end my message by reiterating that while employers may be directly responsible for creating jobs, the whole of government approach to facilitate this to happen cannot be overemphasized. Business efficiency and productivity, ensuring that the regular is conducive. There has to be a stable and predictable business environment by enforcing the rule of law, protecting intellectual property rights, and foreign investors. Within this context, you can count on ECOP and PhilExport to remain steadfast in working with other agents of positive change in pushing the common agenda of improving the lives of our people and building competitive nation within the bounds and beyond this administration. I wish everyone another meaningful engagement to this conference. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Sergio Ortiz Luis Jr. Important to note what he said about the importance of diversifying our export basket by attracting investments in 4 clusters, including the manufacturing, industrial, transport and technology, and health and life science sectors, as identified by the Department of Trade and Industry. Now, speaking of DTI, our next speaker is Dr. Rafaelita Aldaba. She is the Undersecretary for the Competitiveness and Innovation Group of the Department of Trade and Industry. She was a senior research fellow and acting vice president of the Philippine Institute for Development Studies. She has extensive research experience and has managed research projects with various international organizations such as the World Bank. For today, she will discuss upgrading industries towards inclusive and sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, Yusek Rafaelita Aldaba.
Yeah, thank you, Joyce. Okay. Good morning, everyone. And thank you to Stratbase for inviting me to this roundtable discussion for job creation. Next slide, please. So since 2012, DTI has been focusing its efforts to revive the country's manufacturing industry by collaborating with the industry in the formulation of industry roadmaps. The roadmaps aimed to address the country's most binding constraints, such as low productivity, lack of capital, technology, and skilled labor, particularly for our MSMEs, weak infrastructure, and ease of doing business issues. And using the roadmaps as foundation, the DTI's Comprehensive National Industrial Strategy, or CNIS, provided the framework for the implementation of the Manufacturing Resurgence Program, or MRP, which aimed to support the growth and development of globally competitive and innovative industries, along with the creation of more and better jobs. The CNIS and MRP focused on building a strong and modern industrial base that would enable the real economy to drive the country's rapid, sustained, and inclusive growth. Automotive and auto parts, electronics, garments, food, tool and die, furniture, iron and steel, metal casting, motorcycle and parts, petrochemicals, and shipbuilding were among the priority industries identified for development. And building on the CNIS, the DTI in 2016 started to implement the country's Inclusive Innovation Industrial Strategy, or I-S, with focus on innovation to adapt to changing market trends, such as the entry of the fourth industrial revolution technologies. It is important to point out that in a developing country context like ours, which is characterized by market and coordination failures, the process of upgrading and diversification has not been easy. Hence, while increases in competition from trade liberalization are expected to enhance both innovation and productivity, these gains have not been automatic, as seen from our experience. Vertical and horizontal measures to better equip industries in facing greater competition are needed to be in place in order to realize such gains. And one important industrial policy intervention is the Comprehensive Automotive Resurgence Strategy, or CARS program. This represents a modern industrial policy centered on performance-based and time-bound incentives. We started implementing the program in 2016 to jumpstart auto manufacturing, stimulate investments in parts manufacturing, generate quality jobs, create a competitive industry, and our aspiration, of course, is to become a regional hub in the future. Through a temporary fiscal support of 45,000 pesos per unit of vehicle manufactured, the program helped in closing the competitiveness gap and kickstarted vehicle development in the country. There were two registered participants, Mitsubishi and Toyota, with a combined registered investments of 9.3 billion pesos. Mitsubishi has a registered capacity of 200,000 units, while Toyota has 230,000 units. And apart from their existing parts suppliers, the program registered and supported a total of 9 new parts makers, created a total of 5,751 direct employment, additional 17,368 employment in parts making, and 86,840 ancillary jobs. The estimated foreign exchange savings brought about by the localization of production amounted to 1.01 billion US dollars. And in terms of localization rate, Mitsubishi and Toyota both registered 42%. As compared to prior to the program, the localization rate was below 20%. So amid the fourth industrial revolution technologies, low tariffs, and other challenges to attracting more investments, we have embarked on a new industrial policy which continues to build on the I-S with focus on implementing a science, technology, innovation-driven strategy to strengthen the competitiveness of Philippine industries and create dynamic industry ecosystems that would provide the foundation for generating more and quality jobs and investments, creating new products and services, and ensuring shared prosperity for all. And these are all in line with the administration's 8-point socioeconomic agenda, as well as with the Philippine Development Plan. Our science, technology, and innovation-driven industrial strategy has 6 strategic actions, as you can see on the slide. Embrace Industry 4.0 by adopting new Industry 4.0 technologies like artificial intelligence towards transforming industries and increasing the share of science, technology, and innovation-intensive sectors to our gross domestic product. Other pillars would include development of more innovative MSMEs and startups, the integration of our industry development, trade, and investment policies. This particular pillar is really important in order for us to be able to grow our local industries, diversify our products, and attract more investments, and at the same time, improve our competitiveness so that we'll be able to upgrade our position in global value chains. And then the fourth one would be the promotion of regional development by strengthening regional innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystems. Another important pillar is the upskilling and reskilling of the workforce. We need to build our human resource capabilities in science, technology, and innovation, and ensure that the skills and competencies needed for future production are met and skills mismatches are addressed. And of course, last but not the least is the creation of an enabling economic environment. The priority sectors for growth and development are classified into 4 groups. As you can see on the slide, we have the industrial, manufacturing, and transport cluster covering aerospace, EVs, advanced electronics, chips and products, batteries, processing of green metals like nickel, cobalt, and copper, and advanced manufacturing technologies. The second cluster is the technology, media, and telecommunications, which would cover the IT BPM sector, the creative economy, and the digital economy. The third is the health and life sciences cluster, which would include the biotechnology sector, pharmaceuticals, medical devices, along with digital health products and services, which would contain as well or embed all these new technologies. Lastly, we have the modern basic needs and resilient activities to promote a more resilient economy. And this would cover activities that would support our economic recovery and promote a more sustainable and inclusive growth. And these sectors would be supported through time-bound and performance-based incentives under the Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentives for Enterprises, or CREATE Act, which can serve as a tool to drive the country's recovery and industrialization. At the same time, non-fiscal support would also be provided by addressing the horizontal and vertical issues which we earlier mentioned affecting the operation of these sectors. Transformation plans focus on inclusive growth and in the process, enabling people at every level of society to take part in building an innovative and creative culture. One of the most recent initiatives of DTI is the launching of the Artificial Intelligence Roadmap, which aims to uplift the lives of the Filipino people, industries, and the economy, and to make the Philippines an AI center of excellence. AI adoption can enable the country to tap vast opportunities to help maintain the regional and global competitiveness of our industries, prepare the future workforce for the jobs of the future, and attract the AI R&D of multinational and big tech companies to locate in the Philippines. We've just seen and experienced OpenAI's ChatGPT-4 and how powerful generative AI is, and hence the implementation of this plan is really vital for our industrial transformation. And one of the major recommendations of the roadmap is the building of an AI center, which will be a public-private partnership to perform collaborative AI R&D consultancy services, creation of AI tech products, the conduct of data literacy programs, and attract leading global firms to set up their R&D activities in the country. The center would focus on key areas utilizing AI, such as precision farming to improve the productivity of the agriculture sector and increase the incomes of farmers, smart manufacturing, healthcare services, AI-powered business process outsourcing, smart cities, and resilient technology. And again, all of these are aligned with the priority sectors and clusters that we've seen earlier. Now, for the other Industry 4.0 initiatives, these are geared towards supporting firms and industries shift to industry transformation. Apart from the DTI's awareness building program through Industry 4.0 workshops, DTI is also supporting firms and industries in the formulation of their Industry 4.0 roadmaps. DTI is also planning to build an Industry 4.0 for a collaborative learning environment to teach and demonstrate Industry 4.0 management and co-maker and co-working spaces. So while some jobs will be lost as a result of automation, new jobs will emerge through the adoption of technologies that will increase worker productivity. And to ensure that our system of learning and signaling job fit will provide the agility that lifelong learners require, DTI has a new initiative which was launched in 2021. This is the Philippine Skills Framework. And this serves as a common reference or language that employers and workers share in order to ensure the match between jobs and skills. So, to conclude, structural change through a new industrial policy that is science, technology, and innovation-based is needed to make our industries competitive and create an environment that is conducive to private sector development. With science, technology, and innovation at the front and center of the country's strategic policies and programs, and with our people at the heart of our digital transformation, industries would be in a better position to face competition in both domestic and export markets. Innovation is crucial as the Philippines adopts automation, robotics, artificial intelligence, and other new technologies emerging from the fourth industrial revolution. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Yusek Aldaba, for that very interesting presentation. I am sure many of our participants have some questions in mind right now. And again, to those who wish to participate in the open forum later, you may write your questions in the Q&A box below. Again, thank you very much, Yusek Aldaba, for your presentation, ma'am. Now, our next speaker is Mr. Michael Guarin. He is the Vice President for Internal Affairs of the Financial Executives Institute of the Philippines. He previously served as the president of Finex for 2022. Now, he is also the head of the Deal Advisory Group of RG Manabat and Company, or KPMG, in the Philippines. His experiences include providing financial due diligence services for various industries such as financial, industrial, healthcare, retail, energy, and media. For today, Mr. Guarin will talk about incentivizing businesses for sustained growth and expansion. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Michael Guarin.
Thank you, Joyce. Good morning. Just waiting for my deck to become visible. All right, perfect. So again, good morning. It is my pleasure to be here. Thank you to Strat-based ADRi Institute for the invitation to Finex. Thank you, Professor Dindo Manhit. Thank you for the talk earlier, although he's not here. Mr. Sergio Ortiz Luis, thank you. And then Yusek Aldaba, very informative. And then also good morning to Mr. Andrew Masigan. Nice seeing you here again. So still here, no, to help support manufacturing executives as they assess different global markets. KPMG collaborated with the Manufacturing Institute, or MI, to see if a quantitative index of the cost of doing business across 17 key manufacturing markets in the developed and emerging markets could be developed. So for this morning, I would like to share the results of that study. Given my co-presenters today, I figured it will be a value add, hopefully in our discussions, if I discuss a more global or more macro perspective of manufacturing. Indeed, if we want to have a robust and very active manufacturing space here in the Philippines, it really has to be in line with how the rest of the manufacturing supply chain is doing around the world. So global manufacturing companies sees the world as their manufacturing and supply chain canvas, no, so to speak. So if we, the Philippines, intend to convince these companies to make us a more central part of their overall supply chain, we need to have a better understanding of their options. With what other countries are they looking at, and what are their primary considerations? Across the globe, manufacturers are taking a critical look at their networks. Some of them have already concluded that re-evaluation, but we'd like to think that there are plenty of companies that are still in that process of potentially deciding whether they will rejigger or reconfigure their global manufacturing footprint. Confidence in supply chains has been shaken, definitely, as a result of the pandemic. But as mentioned by Professor Manhit, a lot of the levels, pre-pandemic levels, are being hit by most of the countries, not just by the Philippines. And therefore, there's now a re-evaluation of what needs to be done post-pandemic. So policy disputes and tariffs have likewise undermined global trade, and customer demands and expectations have shifted. Many manufacturers are asking whether their current production footprint, global, is still optimal in the context of this new reality. So as they rethink their network, cost is coming under the microscope. Cost is we're used to that, being a low-cost, relatively low-cost country. It is part and parcel of the evaluation done by manufacturers who have already decided to locate here in the Philippines. But what manufacturers increasingly recognize is that labor costs are only part of the overall cost of doing business that can vary from market to market. So in fact, we call these the secondary costs, or those typically related to the business environment, or using Philippine vernacular, our EODB, ease of doing business, are often a better predictor of a market's overall cost of doing business than primary costs like labor can. Yet, quantifying these costs and their impact on a manufacturer's overall operations can be challenging. So moving on to the next slide. There. So maybe just to give you a quick overview, so given that this was done on a global context, based on the index seen, if you look at the upper left corner, Canada actually ranked first for overall cost of doing business. I will explain later, it's a combination of cost advantages as well as secondary cost advantages. But not surprisingly, if you look at the left hand side, Asia Pacific markets, we performed well. But again, the manufacturing giants in Asia Pacific definitely led the way, led by Taiwan, South Korea, and Malaysia. And then traditional low-cost markets like Mexico, India, China, and Brazil returned higher than average cost of doing business results. And then in terms of the cost impacts, secondary cost index performance, it continues to be a strong predictor for the overall cost of doing business. And then normally it's a give and take. So countries that did well on primary factors tend to perform poorly on secondary factors and vice versa. And then something that's to our benefit, given all of the tax reforms and improvements that we've been going through as a country, excuse me. At least tax reforms, based on the study, has a significant impact on a country's relative ranking. Sorry about that. And then something about the world in general. Many manufacturers are currently reassessing their supply chain costs and stability, as mentioned earlier. And given that we continue to be in a relatively unstable, but better definitely this year, exchange rates remain to be moving a bit, which can have a direct impact on costs. And the automation and introduction of more of higher level of technology into manufacturing. So automation, it is changing the dynamics and value equation of certain markets and sectors. So still on this slide, as mentioned, where to locate a production facility, it is an important strategic, it has to be emphasized. Being a strategic decision, we need to be convincing the senior management and as well as the boards of these companies. So the location decision will definitely have a long-term impact on performance. The selection of a particular site, or in our case, a country, requires more than an assessment of labor costs. Labor costs, I'd like to think we have an advantage, but there are so many other factors that these companies consider before making that final decision. So it requires the consideration of factors such as setting up cost of the facility, real estate costs, energy costs, the quality of the labor force and infrastructure, and even based on clients that we've helped locate in the Philippines, even access to universities and the size of the graduating batch of engineering and even public administration graduates that are in close proximity to their chosen location. So moving on to the next slide. So based on this study, we won't go through the entire list, but there were a total of 23 considerations. So within the next two slides, I'll be mentioning, we won't go through the details, but during the Q&A, we can definitely go through them in better detail. So out of the 23, we're only seeing the 1 to 12 for now. The first 5 would be what we call the primary. So these are the obvious cost considerations. So hourly compensation costs, real estate costs, which includes cost of leasing a building or a land, utility costs, corporate tax rates, and interest rates. So these are the primary. But then For the secondary items, subcategories included the quality of labor, not just the cost of labor, no, quality of labor, ease of doing business, number two, number three, infrastructure, and then we've likewise included here the subcategories. Again, stepping back, it's important that we are well aware of these considerations because in crafting our strategy for growing the local manufacturing space, for trying to entice companies, and at the end of the day, it will really be a, you know, person to person kind of relationship, no? In addition to the evaluation that will mean the difference on whether these companies will locate in the Philippines or not. So subcategories under quality of labor would be learning adjusted years of schooling. So that is something that they look into, the skill set of graduates and the real value added per employee. Admittedly, some of these considerations were not that visible during engagements that I've personally handled from 10 years, 12 years ago. But again, the actual measurement of value add by an employee is fast becoming a consideration, and it's moving up the scale. And then I understand we do have an entire initiative by the government and by the private sector on how we can help to ease the doing of business, no? Here in the Philippines. So which includes days to start business. You know, the speed will continue to be a primary consideration. Quote unquote burden of government regulation, and how fast or what is the actual process of registering property. Infrastructure, again, we're also very familiar with this. One consideration that we'd like to share would be road quality index. So definitely the DPWH, they're already doing something about this. And then moving on to the rest of the list, 13 to until the end of the list, 23. We can move on there. So again, the subcategory of infrastructure, it really has a longer list, no? Again, it's towards that bias since we're talking about manufacturing. So railroad quality, airport connectivity, liner or shipping connectivity index, electric power losses, percentage of output, so the dependability, no? Exposure to, this is a surprise for me, even water, no? Because definitely if you want to have an efficient process, you want your people to stay in that specific location depending on the manufacturing process, and you know, access to clean and clean and potable water is part of that equation. Reliability of water supply and access to internet Wi-Fi. And then lastly, in terms of risk and protections, again, more on a macro basis, political risk. Again, that was one of the items mentioned by Professor Dindo in his opening remarks. Ability to enforce contracts, protecting minority investors, and lastly, the corruption perception index. Quite a long list, as mentioned, but again, we cannot avoid the fact that these are the considerations, especially by the global players. I know that a lot of, whenever we talk about manufacturing, top of mind would be how do we compete with China? How do we compete with Vietnam, at least recently? But if we really want to level up and we want to become and be known as a global powerhouse, you know, that may be too much, but you know, being a well-known country as far as manufacturing is concerned, these are all of the things. This is not even the an all exhaustive list, but this is definitely part of the consideration for government. And for us here in the panel and for you listening, we know that government has been pushing for initiatives that aim to directly address the measures that I've mentioned. No? So the thing here is making sure that how do we continue that initiative? It is not a 5-year plan, it really extends beyond 5 years, and it has to entail continued efforts across administration on a go-forward basis. So there, no. In terms of the my last slide here, if you can move on to that last slide. So as mentioned, there were, hopefully it's big enough. So overall rankings, you will see here. This study was really a surprise for me, Canada, but not really a big surprise for the Asian countries like Taiwan, South Korea, Malaysia. So again, as mentioned, this is a macro perspective. What we're after, at the end of the day, we really want to dream big and be part of the powerhouses as far as manufacturing is concerned. These are some of the primary competition that we need to that we will need to go up against. So as mentioned, overall rankings, this is already the weighted average between the primary cost index, just the cost considerations, and the secondary cost index, which includes ease of doing business, infrastructure, rights, as mentioned earlier. So we won't go through each and every item, but again, looking at it from an Asia-Pacific lens, we're so used to seeing China, Vietnam, and even Taiwan for technology and electronic parts as our primary competition. But hopefully, by seeing some of these names, countries as a result of this presentation, you'll know that it really is a global competition. And we need to step up and move up in order to enter this big boys and big girls competition as far as manufacturing is concerned. So with that, again, I just wanted to share this, and hopefully, it widens a bit the discussions, and I'm looking forward to the panel discussion later this morning. Back to you, Joyce, and thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Michael Guerin, for that very informative presentation, especially, sir, on the factors manufacturing companies consider before making their final decision where to locate their businesses. That's very detailed. Costs, ease of doing business, quality of labor force, infrastructure, and the risks and protections, among others. So thank you again, Mr. Michael Guerin. So our next speaker is Dr. Ronald Holmes. He is the president of Pulse Asia Research Incorporated, a private non-stock and non-profit research organization that conducts social science research projects. Since 1985, he has been with the Department of Political Science of the De La Salle University, where he is now a full professor. He served as department chair from 1990 to 1996. His research interests include comparative democratization, public opinion, and public finance. Now, today, Dr. Holmes will discuss public perception on strengthening the manufacturing sector to accelerate economic growth. Unfortunately, though, he will not be able to join us live today, but he also sent us a video recording. Let us listen to Dr. Ronald Holmes.
Good morning to everyone, and I'd like to thank once again SAT-based ADRi for this opportunity to publicly release the results from our Ulat ng Bayan March 2023 national survey of 1,200 randomly selected adult Filipinos. In this particular survey, SAT-based asked us to pose 3 questions, the results of which I will present this morning. The first one is to ask Filipinos what they think are the ways that the manufacturing sector contributes to economic growth and development. The second one is whether government should support the manufacturing sector on the basis of the assumed potential of the sector to hasten the country's economic growth and development. And the third one is what specifically should government do to support the growth of the sector. So on the first question, whether we provided them a list, and we asked them in this particular list, what do they think is the major contribution of the manufacturing sector to economic growth and development in the country. As it is put here, the first is that it opens more opportunities for domestic businesses in other sectors to support manufacturing operations. This is a sentiment that is identified by a majority of Filipinos. It doesn't vary across subnational areas and socioeconomic classes that you find here. An equal proportion believe that the manufacturing sector, if it grows and expands, will make goods more affordable and accessible to Filipino consumers. As the cover slide showed, the manufacturing sector essentially has a wide scope. It can be anything from processed or manufactured food to electronics and semiconductors, or even to say other goods that ordinary Filipino consumers would purchase and need. An equal proportion, and this is a plurality of Filipinos, believe that manufacturing sector would invite more local and foreign investments and also produce more products for the local and the export market. About more than a third think that the manufacturing sector really refines the skills of the Filipino workforce. And again, the same proportion, third of Filipinos think that the government would definitely benefit to an increased revenue from the income of the manufacturing sector, as well as the taxes that are collected from the purchase of manufactured goods. On the second question, we have nearly universal agreement that the government should provide support to the sector, given the presumption that the sector, again, will hasten economic growth and development in the country. This is a sentiment that cuts across subnational areas here, as well as socio-economic classes. On the final question, given that universal agreement, we asked, what should government do to boost the growth of manufacturing and other related industries, the manufacturing sector as a whole? We provided them a list, and as you can see here, it is believed that the opportunities to retool and retrain, which is an intervention that we saw in a number of countries during the economic slowdown due to the pandemic. So people believe that government should start training workers to upgrade or learn new skills. Again, this is something that maybe certain agencies in government can do, working together with the private sector or those who are involved in the manufacturing sector. The second one is to provide more incentives that will make the sector, or incentives that are competitive, that are provided by other countries, so that the sector can be more competitive relative to those other countries. I think this is also something that is related to trying to attract investments in the country. The significant, a plurality believe that the government should also provide access to capital and loans and develop more economic zones. As we know, economic zones or special economic zones, both formal and informal, actually mitigate the risks for those who are located in those economic zones. More particularly, these economic zones will have the proper infrastructure that will support the manufacturing activities. And then you have almost a third to more than a third of Filipinos saying that there are governance issues here, and the governance issues that you see on this particular slide will be essentially related to the implementation of interventions in order to ease this issue, is to abate or control corruption. And then the last one, where you have almost a third saying that government should secure stable and affordable electricity. Of course, this is a separate intervention, and it means that government should look at ways by which we can really produce energy or electricity that will support manufacturing activities. Maraming salamat po. And once again, I'd like to thank for the invitation.
Okay, thank you very much as well, Dr. Ronald Holmes. Very interesting, no? Results, almost uniform response, or about 9 out of 10 Filipinos saying that they believe that the government should support the Philippine manufacturing sector because it has the capacity really to accelerate the growth and development of the country's economy. So on to our last speaker now. He is Mr. Andrew Masigan. He is a political and economic columnist for Philippine Star and Business World. He is a board member of Morningtude Capital Partners, Trimec Trading Corporation, and the Spanish Chamber of Commerce in the Philippines. He is also the country manager of Waste Fuel Holdings and the chief executive officer of Advent Manila Hospitality Group Incorporated. Mr. Masigan will be talking about driving wealth generation in the Philippines. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Andrew Masigan.
Thank you, Joyce, and thank you to the Strat-Based Institute for this invitation. It's an honor to be here. First of all, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I was asked today to talk about reinvigorating the Philippine manufacturing sector. So to approach this, I decided to do it in 3 steps. First, I will prove through statistics that indeed a manufacturing resurgence program is urgently needed by the country, first. Second is I will examine the impediments and the breakthroughs done to encourage more investments in the manufacturing sector. Then I will close with some important takeaways. Next slide, please. Next slide. Are we here yet? There you go. Okay. Let's imagine for a moment that the Philippines is a corporation that is engaged in international trade. PH Inc. managed to generate $78.8 billion worth of revenues. Actually, these are actual statistics based on last year's data. The Philippines Inc. generated $78.8 billion in merchandise export revenues. But since the country has a weak manufacturing base, it imports practically all its needs, from fuel to raw materials to supplies needed by its supply chains and even much of the consumables of its people. With that, it imported $137.12 billion worth of goods, merchandise. It ended up with a trade deficit of $58.32 billion. It is a massive amount. Luckily, PH Inc. sells services as well. It generated $32.5 billion worth of revenues through its IT BPO sector, but also spent $16.9 billion on services contracted. Although exports of services registered a surplus, it was still not enough to cover the trade deficit. So we ended up with a $42.72 billion deficit, still very large. But PH Inc. has debts to pay, interest falling due, and dividends to be repatriated abroad. So how to pay for this? It has no choice but to utilize its windfall income received from OFW remittances, to utilize the investments and capital infusions generated over the year, to utilize its savings and cash reserves, and if that is not enough, to acquire more debt. Next slide, please. So taking all inflows and outflows into its consideration, PH Inc. registered a current account deficit of $17.8 billion last year, representing 4.3% of GDP. Mind you, this is the largest current account deficit recorded in this century. As we all know, a current account represents the country's transactions with the world. Take a look at the trend, and the Philippines booked a current account deficit straight every year, no? Since 2016, only broken by the year 2020, since there was a slowdown in imports, and there was also an influx in foreign loans coming in. So the Philippines has been an import-dependent country since 2005, growing with increasing severity. In 2012, the Aquino administration, through the DTI, tried to mitigate the situation by launching a manufacturing resurgence program. It was very successful, now, which I'll talk about again later. But unfortunately, the data shows that it lost a little bit of steam during the Duterte administration. Next slide, please. So with gaping deficits, PH Inc. has had no choice but to fill the gap by acquiring more debt. So we have ended the year 2022 with 249 billion worth of debt, representing 60.9% percentage of GDP. Mind you, this was not even the highest percentage yet. We peaked at 63.7 last June of 2022 with 63.7% debt to GDP ratio, which is the highest, mind you, the highest we have reached in the recent past, and way above the 60% threshold of debt to GDP. Next slide, please. Also, government international reserves have also been diminishing from its peak of 109.8 billion in 2020. Of course, this was the year when there was a large influx of foreign debt. So naturally, GIR peaked. So we ended the year with 11.7 months of imports. That was in 2020, but it has been diminishing since then. As of the close of December 2022, our GIR amounted to 99.7 billion, representing 8.7 months of imports. So we are on a diminishing trend. Next slide, please. Next slide. Well, the culprit to all this is the enormous trade deficit caused by our ever-increasing imports. And you will see the growing trend, no? Our appetite for imports has been growing at twice the rate of our exports, hence the trade deficit growing exponentially. Okay, next slide, please. One will argue that the increasing import bill is largely due to raw materials for intermediate goods, especially for electronics goods, capital goods, fuels, and related minerals. But really, 15.3, the data shows that 15.3% of our import bill is comprised of consumer goods. And this includes food, garments, construction supplies, automobiles, luxury goods, and other consumable goods. No? And my thesis here is that this is what we must mitigate through some degree of import substitution. Next slide, please. So how to tame the trade deficit? Okay, there's really only two ways. One is to increase exports, whether through exportation of services through ITBPO services, or merchandise exports, manufacturing, mining products, etc. Or increase imports by achieving a certain degree of import substitution. Sorry, it's a tongue twister. To achieve both would require a manufacturing resurgence. Next slide, please. So if you look at the top 20 products of the commodity mix of our exports, you will find that it is rather one-dimensional. So 57.1% of all our exportations really comprise or are comprised by electronics products. The rest are other manufacturers, represent anywhere from 0.5 to 5.4%. So very small, no? The lion's share is really electronics. What I'd like to point out through this slide is that we have lost our competitiveness in many key industries, including garments and textiles, shrimps, prawns, tuna, carrageenan, seaweed, and other seafood products, abaca and rami fibers, mangoes, tobaccos, creative industries, rubber, footwear, iron and steel. These are products that we largely import nowadays, no? Whereas in years past, these were export winners for the Philippines. Next slide, please. So one may ask, has the manufacturing sector been growing? Well, relative to has the manufacturing sector been growing relative to services? Well, the fact is it's only grown 3 times since 2010. No, the pace of manufacturing has only grown 3 times larger than services since 2010, and that happened in 2014 and 2017. This was fueled. I give credit really to the DTI for their excellent manufacturing resurgence program, which paid dividends in these years. And we also saw a surge in the manufacturing sector in 2021. That was because of pent-up demand. No, so really you'll see that the need to focus on the manufacturing sector cannot be overemphasized. Next slide, please. Okay, so one may ask, has the manufacturing sector been growing in the first place? Or has it been on a decline? It's been growing, and there's no argument there. As a matter of fact, it grew by 11%, 11.1% in terms of value of production last year, and 7.2% in terms of volume of production. But see, the growth is not the issue, but rather the scale of the manufacturing sector, or the lack of it, is the core of the matter. Okay, so next slide. Let's talk now about the utilization rates of Philippine factories and plants. And you will see that utilization rates range anywhere from 70 to 73%, which is really not bad in the whole scheme of things. But again, it is not the utilization rate or the growth rate that's the issue. The issue here is the scale or the size of manufacturing. The manufacturing sector relative to GDP, the size of the pie is what we're talking about. And that's what we need to focus on. Next slide, please. So as we all know, the amount of FDIs generated by a country provides a fair indication of how vibrant a manufacturing sector is in that particular country. FDIs have an impact not only on the manufacturing sector, but also on export performance. And this, you will see how the Philippines has fared in comparison to Vietnam. So if you aggregate the Philippine intake of FDIs versus that of Vietnam, you will see that Vietnam's intake is 2x, more than 2x that of the Philippines from 2012 to 2022. Okay, so naturally this redounds to export performance too. Next slide, please. And you will see that the Philippines generated 78.8 billion in merchandise exports last year, as compared to Vietnam at 372 billion, Malaysia 357 billion, Indonesia 292 billion, and Thailand at 287 billion. What's interesting here is that if we add services of exports to our merchandise exports, combine them together, it amounts to 111.1 billion. So still 1/3 of that of Vietnam. We really need to ramp up our exports to balance our trade, or rather our trade deficit. And to do that, really, a manufacturing sector is needed. Next slide, please. Sorry, a manufacturing resurgence is needed. Sorry. Okay, and here's where the conundrum lies. Okay. So moving forward, there is no other way but to encourage more investments in the manufacturing sector. We all know that, okay? That's what we've been talking about all morning. But here is where the conundrum lies. Due to a poor regulatory, justice, and governance regime, the Philippines has ceased to become a hospitable country for manufacturing. has become easier to import and cheaper to import goods rather than manufacture them. So we've heard this so many times before, okay? We've heard what the impediments are to the manufacturing sector many, many times before. You know? So allow me to repeat it just one more time for good measure. And I would like to say that this complements the list of impediments that my colleague here, Michael Gorin, discussed earlier. So next slide, please. On infrastructure, you'll see that among the impediments that prevent investments into the manufacturing sector coming in are expensive power costs. Again, we've heard this over and over again, but let me mention it again for good measure. Expensive manufacturing costs, expensive logistics costs, lack of infrastructure, fragmented supply chains, and slow broadband connections. Now, in terms of regulations and governance, the Philippines has the third longest foreign investment negative list still among emerging economies. Corruption is rampant among regulatory agencies. Lack of transparencies in procurement tenders, cumbersome business registration. It takes 33 days to set up a business in the Philippines still, no, up to now. Frustrating and burdensome customs and immigration procedures, and difficulty in claiming VAT refunds. But I think with the passage of the VAT refund amendment last week, this will improve soon. On the justice system, this seems to be a big impediment, no? When you talk to the various members or investors from the various chambers of commerce. A complex, slow, and inefficient resolutions to commercial disputes, corrupt judges, confusing laws. Our system, our legal system, is a mix of civil, common, Islamic, and customary laws. So it's quite confusing. An inexperienced judiciary, especially in the fields of technology, science, and intellectual property. Separate action must be filed for foreign judgments to be recognized in the Philippines. Weak enforcement of intellectual property rights, patents, and trademarks. Inconsistent implementation of the 2010 bankruptcy and insolvency law. So these are the impediments, no? On when you talk about the regulatory regime is concerned. But this is not to say that we have not made progress, no? In the last few years, we have made significant progress in these fronts, and let me enumerate them. Okay, next slide, please. In terms of infrastructure, we are catching up, and we have spent 5.4% of GDP on average from 2016 to 22. Broadband speed has improved, as have digital payments. Okay, so that's in infrastructure. In terms of regulations and governance, PEZA remains known for its regulatory transparency and zero red tape. The amendment of the Public Service Act, Retail Trade Liberalization Act, and Foreign Investment Act have passed, and that has opened the way of a deluge of new investments, and owning 100% equity in certain sectors, 6 sectors in particular. Reduction of corporate income tax from 30% to 25% thanks to the CREATE law. Passage of the Ease in Doing Business Act. The establishment of the Anti-Red Tape Authority and the Philippine Competition Commission. Pending integration into RCEP. A stronger intellectual property code has been implemented. A strong AMLA law has been implemented. And simplified foreign exchange regulations have been implemented. So there are things working to our advantage. And I think this is seen with the relative improvement in our foreign investment intake to fuel the manufacturing sector. So having said that, these are the intakes or the insights that I'd like you to walk away with or come away with. Next slide, please. Next slide. So, one of the reasons why the Philippines is perpetually short of funds is because of severe import dependence and/or our lack of export revenues. Operating with huge trade deficits year on year leads to increased public debts and an erosion of cash reserves. So this makes it unsustainable. The need to mitigate the trade deficit through increased exports of merchandise and services cannot be overstated. Government must pursue a manufacturing resurgence with vigor and commitment. Only then can the economy improve its export performance and achieve some degree of import substitution. The way to encourage investments in the manufacturing sector is through regulatory, judicial, and governance reforms. Although many aspects of our regulatory regime has improved, current efforts are no longer enough. The breadth of reforms must be widened and its pace accelerated. So with that, I end my presentation. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope I was able to give a few insights on what are the impediments and the things working to our advantage as far as attracting manufacturing investments are concerned. Thank you again.
All right, thank you very much for that very insightful and quite honest presentation, Mr. Andrew Masigan, especially on the impediments. As you mentioned, the manufacturing sector here in the country are facing, and the gradual improvements, or at least we have silver lining amid these impediments. So, and I can already see some questions related to the presentation of Mr. Masigan in the Q&A box below, and our other presenters as well. So without further ado, we will now proceed to our open forum. So may we ask our speakers again, we still have Mr. Masigan on screen. So may we ask Yusek Aldaba if she is still here with us right now, and Mr. Guarin to once again turn on your cameras, please, so you can join us in our open forum. Do we still have Yusek Aldaba with us? Okay. Also, if you noticed, there, good to see you again, ma'am. So also, if you noticed, just a quick PSA, I think we've been experiencing some technical difficulties the whole morning, mostly audio and video lagging due to poor internet connection. Must be because of the bad weather since early this morning. So to everyone watching us today, please bear with us as we go through this event amid these technical difficulties. So again, to those who wish to participate in the open forum today, you may write your questions in the Q&A box below. So to start our open forum, I would like to ask the first question, please, to our speakers. Based on the latest Pulse Asia survey as presented by Dr. Ronald Holmes, 89%, or about 9 out of 10 Filipinos, believe that the government should support the Philippine manufacturing sector because it has the capacity to accelerate the growth and development of the country's economy. Do you think it's time for the Philippine government to provide incentives to companies that are investing in manufacturing facilities that will serve specifically to our local market? And just a quick follow-up to that, should these incentives be the same as what exporters are currently receiving already? May I ask Yusek Aldaba, please, if you can share your insights?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Well, definitely for us in the government, manufacturing has always been a priority. But I guess right now, we are more targeted. I mean, in terms of the specific sectors that we are promoting in manufacturing, we have already identified, and I earlier presented the 4 clusters. As compared in the past, wherein we're just including manufacturing as one of the priorities, but not a clear listing of which particular sectors do we want more investments to come in. So I guess that's one basic difference. And then, of course, there is the CREATE law, which is currently providing a menu of incentives. And at the same time, there are tiers, as earlier shown in my presentation. The more high-tech the activity is, the higher the incentive. And at the same time, the farther away the activity is from NCR and other urban areas, again, the higher the incentives that will be provided. And this is important as a way for us to take into account the development, the industrialization that needs to take place in the regions. Because right now, if you look again into our gross domestic product and the contribution of the different regions, it's primarily still NCR, Central Luzon, and Calabar Zone, contributing more than 50% of our GDP. And hence, it's really important for us to achieve our inclusive development goal, that we be able to provide more jobs, more investments, and in particular, we want this to go to the regions. And at the same time, I think I would also want to mention the point regarding the incentives that are being provided to more high-tech products, considering that we're now living in a different world. We're witnessing the power of all these new technologies. And in order for us to really be able to go through structural transformation, industrial transformation, which we've seen happen in Thailand, in Vietnam, in Malaysia, Indonesia, South Korea, Japan in the earlier years, we can make use of these new technologies in order for us to leapfrog and be able to really be able to undergo a structural transformation. By that, I mean an increase in the share of the manufacturing industry, which I think is at the heart of our discussions this morning. What we want to see, really is for us to be able to achieve maybe something like a 30% share of GDP, because currently we're still at 21%. And through the adoption of these new technologies, I believe that we will be able to achieve this goal of structural transformation. That way we'll be able to promote regional development, address poverty, be able to create more and better jobs, and at the same time, be able to, I think very important is the entry of new investments. And so really the goal now is to adopt a science, technology, innovation-driven industrial policy. Earlier as well, I've presented a case of the Comprehensive Automotive Resurgence Strategy Program, wherein government intervened through the use of industrial policy. And we're also in the future looking into the same mechanism by which we will be able to make the Philippines a hub in the electric vehicle segment. So I guess I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Maybe also ask Mr. Masigan and Mr. Gurin, would you like to answer, should the government provide incentives to companies that are investing in manufacturing? And maybe if you want to comment also on what Yusek said.
I think that it should be taken holistically. Incentives is one part of the equation, but not the only part of the equation. What the Undersecretary mentioned about providing incentives to manufacturing concerns outside NCR, Central Luzon, and Calabar Zone makes a lot of sense. But that's not the end-all, be-all of what attracts foreign investors. There's the issue of power costs. There's the issue of labor, skills and capacitation, skills development. There's the issue of logistics infrastructure. And again, I must emphasize, there must be a series of reforms in the justice system. This weighs heavy in every survey that we look at. Sanctity of contracts, the slow resolution of consumer disputes, labor cases taking years to be resolved. So again, the gist of what I want to say is that it's holistic. We have to create the whole ecosystem to make the Philippines a more conducive manufacturing center. incentives will help, but it is not the end all be all.
Mhm.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Godin? Yes.
And then to further echo what Andrew and Yusek Aldab already mentioned. No? So definitely there has to be a rebalancing. Going back to part of what Professor Manhit mentioned earlier, having a stronger manufacturing base will definitely give us a stronger and more robust overall economy, given that it really touches more on more portions of the population. And depending on how we execute that manufacturing strategy, it's more inclusive, right? Not just on the 3 regions where a lot of the manufacturing sites are focused in. And then again, merely echoing what Andrew mentioned, multi-sectoral approach, right? So for example, definitely Department of Education would have to be pulled in to the overall equation because it is part and parcel of the factors that would convince new investors to come in and strengthen the already existing manufacturers who are already in that space. So those would be my, and you know, I think so, given that manufacturing continues to be a relatively small portion of the, you know, services, manufacturing, or industries and agriculture equation of our economy. And incentives would definitely be one of the ways to go, because we cannot expect that a reshifting or a change without, you know, either a stick or a carrot, right? So at least by putting in the incentives, that's the carrot part. And then depending on the, you know, legislators or who will put in that overall program, let's think of a good stick, you know, to help further push the overall initiative.
Okay, thank you. Very comprehensive answers. So also in the Pulse Asia survey earlier, it showed that Filipinos believe that the manufacturing sector contribute to economic growth, but by creating livelihood opportunities for local service businesses, and also important by making goods more affordable and accessible to Filipino consumers. So in your opinion, is it time, do you think, for the Philippines to also start focusing on industries that can address our current food security problems? And also, just a quick follow-up, should we give incentives to companies that will invest to provide a smoother and more productive food value chain? Yusek, what do you think?
Yes, like what I've mentioned earlier, food security, the improvement of our agricultural sector, especially through the again, I would like to emphasize the need for us to adopt all these new technologies in order for us to improve the productivity and competitiveness of our agricultural sector. Again, if you look at the statistics, the agricultural sector has been lagging behind in terms of growth performance. It has the lowest actually in terms of growth contribution, and even its employment contribution has been still relatively large. But when you try to look at its contribution to value added, and then given the relatively large number of people employed in the agricultural sector, that's a reason why its productivity is low. So and in order for us to improve its productivity, there's really a strong need to adopt these new technologies, maybe smart farming and introducing all these modern techniques in order for us to improve productivity. By improving productivity, we can reduce the prices of our agricultural products. And it can also serve as inputs to manufacturing, because right now the two are disconnected. If you look at the entire manufacturing industry, looking at the contribution of food processing, for instance, it has the highest actually, around 30%. But again, a lot of the inputs that are needed in processing, these are imported, and hence we're missing a lot of opportunities because of the low productivity in the manufacturing industry, and hence we need to connect these two sectors together And then we infuse innovation. We introduce as well the new technologies. That I think is really crucial in order for us to achieve our goal of food security. Without those elements, but of course, taking into account as well all the things, all the factors that were earlier mentioned by our colleagues. But at the heart of, I mean, looking at the issues and problems affecting the low productivity in the agricultural sector, really the main solution would really for us to improve our productivity by modernizing and embracing these new technologies. And I know a lot of our farmers are already aging, and we actually did a survey in terms of their readiness to the adoption of these new technologies. And believe me, they don't want to adopt these new technologies. They prefer still the manual processes that they've been utilizing for decades, no? But again, we know that we have the youth, and with the use of these new technologies, we can make agriculture sexy, and that would really be very helpful in terms of supporting the growth of the agricultural sector.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Andrew, Michael?
Well, I couldn't agree more with Yusek Aldaba that we must lean into technology to fire up the agricultural sector to achieve some degree of food security. We need not look far. There are global models of countries whose terrain is not even as hospitable or as ideal for agriculture, but they have become agriculture superpowers, such as among them are the Netherlands and Israel. No, so these are countries who've leaned in on technology, and it was really university based. So they created an ecosystem based around a university similar to our UP Los Baños, no, IRRI, similar to that. And from there, they were able to, because of government support, they were able to create new technologies to create, to increase productivity to a point where, for the Netherlands, for instance, 70% of their agricultural output are exported. So I couldn't agree more. Point number one. Point number two is, yes, we have an aging farm sector. The workforce of our farmers are increasing in age, and there's no replacement for our farmers. There's no replacement because it's a low-paying job. Okay, it's a low-paying, low-yield job. Okay, not to mention the toll, the physical toll on one's body. No, so if we lean on agriculture, then it creates better paying jobs for the youth, which will attract them to get into the agricultural sector. Leaning on agriculture also ensures security of tenure and retirement, because it's run like a manufacturing concern. It's run professionally. Okay, it also provides possibilities for career advancement. So instead of being a farmer for the rest of your life, if you lean into agriculture and it's run like a manufacturing concern with post-harvest manufacturing, it becomes a whole value chain where a packer today can be a manager tomorrow. So the benefits are multi-layered and multi-tiered. So I cannot agree more in leaning into technology to fire up agriculture.
Yeah. And for me, Joyce, one thing that strikes me is that we do have engagements with local government units and other governments regarding, a master plan moving up from the current situation for the next 5 to 10 years. What strikes me the most is that a lot of the solutions, a lot of the things that we're talking about, I'd like to think there are already existing studies done decades ago, several years ago, that are available. But what's happening there is the implementation of those plans somehow gets stalled, either as a result of the rolling administration, different leaders from one period to another. So I think to the extent that if the government can combine or consolidate all of these plans and make it really a holistic nationwide initiative with actual monitoring and milestones in place, I think we can do a lot. I mean, agricultural solutions like basic farm to market, I'm sure we've heard of this several decades now. Making sure that there's enough farm to market roads, farm to market infrastructure in place, helping the smaller manufacturers. It's really a wide spectrum. I think introduction of more recent technology is applicable for those that are already using existing technology. But we do have, manufacturers who are not yet on that level. So something simpler can definitely also go a long way for those. So, different solutions depending on where in the spectrum being advanced they are. So those would be my thoughts regarding this topic.
All right. We have quite a lot of questions sent to our Q&A box. It's a very interesting discussion right now. So siguro we can shorten some of our answers so we can go through as many questions as we can also, since we're almost out of time. I guess our first question is from Lance Yu of Rappler. He has a couple of questions. First, can you provide examples of successful collaborations between foreign investors and domestic manufacturing companies in the Philippines? And how can the government strike a balance between attracting foreign investment and also supporting domestic enterprises in the manufacturing sector? Of course, ayaw natin mapag-iwanan, di ba, yung local manufacturing enterprises. And what are the biggest gaps in infrastructure and knowledge capital that are essential for setting up advanced manufacturing operations in the country? So, Yusek, would you like to answer first?
I don't know if I can answer them very briefly. Those are 3 questions, but you can get in touch with me for more details. But yes, there are successful collaborations, especially we have a lot of joint venture companies operating in manufacturing, and then there are also partnerships between multinationals and local companies, particularly in supplying parts and components that would be used by the multinational. Striking a balance. I think that's why our in terms of the incentives that we are providing, they are I mean, we try to make them the same or neutral. So in the past, only domestic companies are allowed to, for example, enjoy certain types of incentives, and multinationals are, or foreign-owned companies are not. But that particular regulation has already been removed. And again, I think I've already mentioned our goal to promote regional industrialization, and that's one way by which we would be able to support the development of export-oriented sectors, for example, by developing our own local parts and components sector, as well as by providing and growing and supporting the agricultural sector, which is an input to food processing and other products that are being exported. Biggest gaps in infrastructure and knowledge capital for advanced manufacturing operations. I think the cost of investing in new technologies, that is one important consideration among our manufacturers. And in most instances, like for example, let me also cite the agricultural sector, there is really a lack of detailed and full comprehensive knowledge with respect to the applications of these new technologies. And so I think there's really a need for us to educate our farmers, educate our manufacturers in terms of how the adoption of these new technologies could enhance and could improve their productivity. And at the same time, also innovation again is very important. We are adopting these new technologies not only to improve our competitiveness, but also to make use of these new technologies to create new products and new processes and new business models. There are a lot of startups working in these areas, and I think it's important for our manufacturers to link up with these startups who are already providing tech solutions to supply chain problems, for instance, including access to finance, which are, and the same would apply to the agricultural sector.
Perhaps I'll ask the next question to Andrew and Michael. They can, para mas mabilis na rin tayo. From Orly Oxalis of Citizen Watch Philippines, almost related to what Yusek Aldaba actually said, education and training are critical in creating a skilled workforce. Are there any action plans in the pipeline on reforming the education system to better prepare students for the demands of the manufacturing sector? Although parang mas si Yusek ulit na makakasagot nito.
Yes, very quickly, we are working together, DTI, CHED, DepEd, TESDA, and the other government agencies, DOLE and NEDA. We are all, including DOST and DICT, we are all working together as we implement this new initiative, the Philippine Skills Framework, which is really important in order for us to address the skills mismatch here in the country. And it's a holistic approach. We try, of course, to work together with all the industries involved, because their inputs are really needed in terms of identifying what the future skills and competencies would be needed. And all this, that the skills framework that we developed are being provided to TESDA, to CHED and DepEd for them to check their existing programs and course offerings and try to of course, offer and introduce this new training courses that would be required for future production. So it's ongoing.
All right.
And I think, Joyce, in relation to that question, any collaboration between a school/university and an actual manufacturing company, wherein students reach a certain level will have actual practicum or on-the-job training even before graduation. Having those before graduation, those types of programs are things that we need, but I think those are the exceptions, right? There's always that issue of either the manufacturing requirement is not big enough such that they cannot guarantee employment for students that are 2 or 3 years removed from graduation. So, but the framework for having a directly crafted or customized skill set specific to a manufacturing concern is already in the works, but it's not yet implemented wholly or in full blown.
If I may add, Joyce, very quickly, that in other countries, best practices, the collaboration between the academe and the manufacturing sector or the agri sector are very close. So one feeds into the other. So manufacturing concerns, private sector fund studies for innovation, research and development, new technologies, and this is funneled back to the manufacturing sector. But in the process, enriches the academe, provides them with practical, with true to life, not theoretical, but really on the ground, funds the academe to come up with on the ground technologies which are beneficial to the manufacturing sector. So you have this academe alive and kicking with practical technologies, and you have this side, the manufacturing sector, funding. It's a win-win for both. And the researchers and innovators in the academe will automatically find jobs in the manufacturing sector because they are cognizant and they're the proprietors of these technologies. So having a symbiotic ecosystem between the academe and the manufacturing sector has always been a beneficial model that was practiced in other parts of the world.
All right, thank you. Since we're talking about upskilling and reskilling, I think I was just informed that a representative from from a consumer group, Bantay Consumer Kuryente at Kalsada, is here with us to ask a question. Mr. Louis Montemar, co-convener of BK3. Would you like to ask your question, sir?
Yes, Joyce, thank you very much. And I suppose our DTI Undersecretary would be the best one to respond to this. Ma'am, from our group, we'd like to know how can upskilling and reskilling initiatives be made accessible to workers in the informal economy who may not have access to formal education or training opportunities like others in our community? Yes.
Yeah, I thank you po. First, meron po ba kayong organization? I mean, yung mga nasa informal sector. If you can get in touch with us, please, we would love to really support you in terms of your reskilling and upskilling needs. Before po, TESDA was part of DTI, but since last year, it was transferred to DOLE, but even so, we still sit in the board of TESDA, and we work together closely with TESDA in terms of upgrading our curricula, taking into account all these future skills and competencies that are needed by industry. So, sir, please, if you could get in touch with me.
Yes, thank you, ma'am.
All right. Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Joyce, no, just one thing, this is related to what Andrew was saying a while ago. And Andrew, I really very much appreciate your support. I know I've been reading your articles ever since, and thank you for the support. We have the regional inclusive innovation centers that really try to connect our universities with the various industries, and these regional inclusive innovation centers are operating in the regions, not in NCR, but in the regions, and there are 11 right now, and we have already a number of use cases, a number of really very insightful and interesting cases, partnerships on R&D between industry and academe in the regions. Particularly, I'd like to mention USTP, University of Science and Technology of the Philippines in Cagayan de Oro, which has been working together with industry in coming up with new products and processes.
All right. Thank you very much, ma'am. We still have more than 20 questions in our Q&A box. I think you can see those questions, but unfortunately we don't have time. So we are allowed one last question. We have one from the Executive Director of the Nordic Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Jesper Svenningsen. His first question was actually, I think, briefly answered already. What areas do you see as the main ones to improve on to be more competitive? He said that he believes the Philippines could be a great country for manufacturing. However, it seems like the neighboring countries continue to get the majority of manufacturing. So what areas should be improved on for us to be more competitive? And just a quick follow-up to that is sustainability ranking not starting to show up as a secondary criteria with EU requirements on the sustainability report? I would think it is, or will it be a significant factor in the future?
I'll take up the sustainability part. For sure, the sustainability aspect of any manufacturing location is front and center, especially now, ESG and how it has been pervading into the board of directors as far as the selection is concerned. So that's correct. Several companies that we've spoken to are now changing even their manual of operations to take into account ESG, and it's not just simply editing it at the macro level. What studies are being made by private companies identifying on a by department or function, sales, marketing, manufacturing, even finance and reporting, how can ESG be embedded in their overall operations? So definitely, as far as selection of a location for manufacturing is concerned, that will be a big part of it.
Okay. Would you like to add pa po, Yusek or Andrew?
Yeah,
I'm-
maybe I'll just oh sorry, very
Go
quickly.
on.
I will just add on the new areas. I think because these are the global trends that we're seeing. So well, related to sustainability of renewable energy, clean energy projects, and EV. And then, of course, in manufacturing, it would be towards health, education, addressing all of this, utilizing technologies. And of course, central to all of this would be electronics, semiconductor parts and components, and the application of new technologies in these areas, robotics and sensors and etc.
Okay, Andrew, or should I proceed
Nothing to
with our
add.
final question? Okay, one last question from Jackie Pascual of ABS-CBN. Final question na po, how are high inflation and high interest rates affecting the manufacturing sector? And will this be a problem in the coming months? Andrew, would you like to answer first?
Sure. Yes, it has an impact. As Michael mentioned earlier, the cost weighs heavy in attracting investments in the manufacturing sector. Now, not only do foreign investors come in with their capital, much of their capex expenditures are sourced locally, and that's where the interest comes into play. So if I'm not mistaken, we're hovering at about, when you talk about commercial industrial loans, at the moment, we're hovering about 6% to 7% interest rate. Now that, for me, is a little bit high. It redounds to higher cost of production. But at the same time, you have to consider this as a function of trying to lower down inflation. So one feeds into the other. The high interest rates is central bank's way of pulling down inflation. So I think that this is a temporary regime. Okay, so hopefully we will be able to. We've seen already a cooling down in inflation, from 8.6 peak a few months ago, and now it's been on a steady decline. So we're hopeful that interest rates will decline as well. The lower the interest rate, the higher the incentive for capital expenditure and expansion of manufacturing capacities.
Michael, you said
All good?
all good.
Well explained by Andrew. Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, and maybe I would just add another global trend that we're witnessing is, the shifting of China towards services, and hence we would expect more manufacturing activities to move to other parts of Asia, and we need to be ready for that, and hence all the more support coming from the government, and government, academe, industry, and other stakeholders should work together. So it's really a whole of society approach, as mentioned by both Andrew and Michael.
Joyce, may I end with just one short commentary? I'd like to take this opportunity to commend both the Board of Investments and PEZA, because they have always been consistently rating very high in all the surveys that we conduct in various chambers of commerce. PEZA is always noted and has always been known for being free of red tape and bureaucratic red tape. And the BOI has been known for being very professional in their approach and nurturing investments from inquiry all the way to fruition. So on that, I want to end with that positive thing, a positive slant to our discussion today. Yes, there are many things that we have to improve on, but at the same note, we have made many advances, and certain aspects of our regulatory framework, like I said, BOI, PEZA, and of course the office of Yusek Aldaba has always been in the forefront of pushing manufacturing and securing greater investments. So there is reason to be optimistic.
All right.
Mm.
Michael, are you saying something?
None.
Okay. All right. So with that, thank you very much to our speakers today. Thank you, Yusek Rafaelita Aldaba, Mr. Michael Gorin, and Mr. Andrew Masigan. Very, very interesting, insightful discussion today. I see our Strat-based president, Mr. Or Professor Victor Andres Dindo Manhit. And also thank you to our other speakers, Dr. Ronald Holmes and Mr. Sergio Ortiz Luis Jr. for joining us today. And thank you also to all our participants who joined us today. We're very sorry we weren't able to take up the other questions, but thank you for participating this morning. We hope you join us again in our next business forum, and we hope you have a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.